Hi, this is Katie with Empowering Astrology, and this is your sneak peek at November's astrology. So, this would be November 2019, and we are going deeper into Scorpio season this month, but we're also coming out the other side with Sagittarius. So, this is meant to give you a, let's say, practical look at the astrology of the upcoming month, but also what's the deeper message? What's the deeper meaning? That's certainly the type of astrology that I do. I want to know, how can I best use this time? What is this astrology trying to, let's say, ask me to do or to become aware of? So there might be times throughout November where we, because it's Scorpio season and it's a time when we have to go deep within, that we're being challenged in some way on an emotional, psychic, or even spiritual level. So for those who are watching live, or even those who are watching the video replay, to send me your questions if you have them. That's what I'm here for, empoweringastrology@gmail.com. This should run anywhere from an hour and a half to 2 hours. It's a lot of stuff to cover. And I know that for those who are waiting for their sign, you might have to wait for a while. So make a drink, fix some dinner, wait for your sign to come up. But even with the other signs, maybe you're keeping in mind a spouse, a good friend, a parent, and you're kind of getting some insight as to what they are going through. So this is your November 2019 astrology planner, and today is October 28th, 2019. And as I said before, my name is Katie Sweetman. I am an astrologer here in Brooklyn, New York. I started Empowering Astrology, hard to believe, almost 10 years ago, to, let's say, give voice to the way that I saw astrology, which looks at, let's say, the difficulties that are inherent in each and one of our charts, and how do we work with them? How do we, let's say, find our highest potential? I'm also a psychic medium, so that's a dimension that I bring into my client consultations beyond the astrology. And so this is the rough agenda for today. We're going to have an overview. I will talk about what's called the ingress and the stations, like which planets are going into new signs and which planets are stationing retrograde or direct. We also have a full moon and a new moon this month, and then I will go sign by sign as to what is going on with each sign. So I am doing it slightly differently than I did in October, but hopefully should help us to have a good narrative for each sign. And, just some technical points before we dive in. Make sure you're reading, or in this case, listening, for your sun and your rising sign. And if you do not know what your rising sign, it is worthwhile, if you can, especially if you are in the US, to get a copy of your birth certificate and get a copy of your birth time. You may have to order what's called the long form birth certificate, because sometimes when you get a copy from the state that you were born, it doesn't have the full birth time. But when you do have that exact birth time, it gives you what's called the rising sign. It's, this constellation that was of the zodiac that was rising at the moment that you were born. So the idea is that your life runs on these two clocks, these interfacing, overlapping, sometimes going against each other clocks, unless you were born at sunrise, and then you just have the clock that's for your sun sign. So a little bit of a technical digression. I know many of you are all around the world. Some of you in Europe, some of you are in Australia. Generally, we're talking, I'm doing this from what's called an East Coast US perspective. In the case of the new and full moons, I do give it to you in, let's say, the major time zones for those who are speaking English. So you've got your England, your Australia, your New Zealand. So let's do an overview. And just to recap for those who joined me a little bit late, if this is your first webinar with me, the format is that if you have questions as we go along, there is a chat function, and just put your question into the chat. And then as we get to each section, I'll check back and see what questions you have. So this is your overview for November 2019. So just on like a very surface level, November is a month that divides us between Scorpio season and Sagittarius season. So this is actually something I was talking about in my Facebook Live today. Scorpio season, of all the 12 signs in the zodiac, there has to be a sign that takes us into, let's say, the darker material of life, a sign that talks about life and death, talks about rebirth, resurrection, transformation. So when we arrive in Scorpio season, we're crossing the veil, we're pulling it back, and we're seeing into a world that is normally invisible. Here, at least in the US and some parts of the world, we celebrate Halloween. Other parts, it's the Day of the Dead. We know instinctively that this is a time that when we honor this natural passage of life. And it's through our experiences with Scorpio that we get tested, we deepen into ourselves, we face our fears, and then we learn something. We learn something powerful. And then when we get to Sagittarius season, as we do at the end of November, we are stepping into the energy of wisdom, knowledge. What do you believe in? Sagittarius is a very philosophical sign. So that's how Sagittarius gets its wisdom. You have to go through Scorpio first. Scorpio, just in general, just some things to keep in mind. It's a fixed sign. It's typically a sign that doesn't like to change, which is ironic considering that it's all about the natural world in a state of flux. But it is a sign ruled by Mars that gives us the courage and the fortitude to go into life's situations where we need that bravery. There's a crisis, or we need to have the courage to face something or to talk about something with somebody. It's a sign of intimacy, vulnerability, but it's also a sign of trust. It's also a sign of sexuality. So Scorpio season is asking us, are we safe? Can we trust? Can we be open? So you might feel just a natural discomfort with this time, and that's what it's supposed to do. So as I was saying that, Mars is the ruler of Scorpio, and it's in Libra for most of November. It actually doesn't leave Libra until November 19th. So it's a time when we're having to do some soul searching, because Libra is what's called the 12th sign of Scorpio. We're having to ask ourselves deeper questions. We need to, kind of disentangle ourselves from the past, let go and prepare for this new life. I mean, that's what Scorpio does, is it prepares us for the next life. So going into Sagittarius season, it's what's called a mutable sign. Mutable signs, take us and prepare us for a coming new season. So, obviously Capricorn here in the Northern Hemisphere is winter. So the sense of things are moving, we're preparing. Sagittarius, it helps us to see the world. It helps us to open up to new options and new ideas. Something to keep in mind in November is that Jupiter, the ruler of Sagittarius, is in Sagittarius. It's been there since November of 2018. And this month, November of 2019, it's wrapping up its stay in its home sign. And so as Jupiter gets to the end of Sagittarius at the end of November, it will go into Capricorn on December 2nd. We might be having this review, in a way, of what Jupiter and Sagittarius has been teaching us. And it has been 12 months of trying to look at these deeper themes of faith and philosophy and, let's say, the faith in ourselves, faith in the world, faith that things will work out. So as I was saying, Jupiter at the end of Sagittarius, towards at the end of November, it's like, what did we learn this past year? I think Jupiter and Sagittarius, Jupiter is the teacher, it's the guru. It's a planet and a sign that has a lot of wisdom. It's learned a lot. And so we might be called towards the end of November to really demonstrate our wisdom. So these are your ingresses and stations for November 2019. We start November 1st, Venus arrives in Sagittarius. It's been in Scorpio since October. I can't think of the exact date, but Venus is traditionally not at home in Scorpio. Venus, normally a planet that is very accommodating and very sweet, has to, let's say, don the clothes of Mars in Scorpio. And so it's been a appointed place for Venus to be, but it's been a time when we've been a little bit more tuned into this idea of relationship and even sexuality as a currency. Venus and Scorpio really highlights transactional relationships, for better or for worse. But I think Venus and Scorpio also has a very strong power to it. It loves body, mind, and soul, sometimes bordering on obsessive. But I think this has added this other element throughout October and also going into November, where we're doing a lot of relationship work. Don't forget, Mars is still in Libra for most of November. And then on the 26th of November, Venus will go into Capricorn. Venus in Capricorn, Venus in Sagittarius, it tends to be more playful. We love travel. We love exploration. We love, kind of the exoticness life, exotic beauty. It's a very bohemian place for Venus because Venus likes a lot of freedom when it's in Sagittarius. So it gets to Capricorn on the 26th, and Venus typically is a bit more traditionally minded when it's in Capricorn. So Venus will, I think we have to kind of really get clear about what we value when Venus goes into Capricorn. Mars, as I was mentioning, arrives in Scorpio on November 19th. So up until this point, Mars is kind of hanging out behind the scenes. Libra is what's called Scorpio's 12th house. But when it gets into Scorpio, we get that last push, that last punch of Scorpio season. It's like Scorpio finally gets its energy back. And if you are a Scorpio and you're watching, it's typically with Mars and Libra at the time when you are not really pushing out there. And so I know if it's your birthday, maybe you're kind of feeling like there's not a lot of traction, or maybe you need to rest more. But if your birthday is the 19th or later, it's going to be a very powerful coming year for you. Mercury is also retrograde for most of November. It actually turns retrograde on the 31st of October, and then it's retrograde until the 20th, and it will turn direct at 11 Scorpio. So we are, in this Scorpio season in November, doing a lot of, let's say, investigation, digging, looking behind the scenes. Mercury in Scorpio is a placement that tends to be very intelligent, very sharp, and you can't kind of, let's say, lie to Mercury and Scorpio. Lies just go, sees right through lies. So I think that there's a sense of truth and information that is very clear when Mercury is in Scorpio. And I think with the retrograde, we do need to double check things, but it could mean that things are coming out. The things that were hidden, the things that were, let's say, people were lying about, come out. And then on the 22nd, the sun enters Sagittarius. We start Sagittarius season. A few days later, Neptune turns direct at 15 degrees of Pisces. So Neptune has been retrograde for 5 months. It's been retrograde, of course, in Pisces, a sign that it's been in since 2012 and won't leave until, I believe, it's 2026, maybe 2025. But this is a time where, on a human collective level, we're all having to really do a lot of deep spiritual work and to open up to something bigger. But it's also been, I think, a bit crazy in the last 8 years, but I digress. So let me just let me just look into the chat before we keep going. Just reading, Jenny, everything is rising sign and sun, correct? Yes, Jenny, if I'm understanding your question correctly, yes, you're reading for your rising sign and your sun sign. So hopefully that makes sense. So, example, let's say you're Gemini, you will listen to the Gemini portion of when we get to the signs. And then if you're Virgo rising, you listen to the Virgo. So this idea that you have these overlapping, rich, sometimes contradictory experiences in your life, depending on what your sun and rising sign is. And I look at astrology from a couple of different angles. One of them is this idea, this metaphor of the clock, that your life has a natural clock, and that when I'm writing horoscopes for you all, I'm just looking to see where the hands are in your clock. And that's how I tell what time it is in your life. Yes, if you're Scorpio, I'm a Scorpio. We'll both read Scorpio together. So we've got a full moon in Taurus on November 12th, 2019. So let's understand the fact that there's a dynamic here that's going on. Scorpio season, Taurus full moon, it's all about this interplay around safety and power. Taurus is so much about ownership. It talks about the physical things that we need. So this might be a full moon when we're thinking a lot about money or material goods or material stability. Do I have enough? Am I safe? Scorpio and Taurus are your wealth signs, in particular Scorpio, because Scorpio draws in resources from other people. So there might be this idea of, what's wealth to us? How do we experience wealth? And of course, wealth can come in a lot of different ways. Might be themes around ownership as well and property. Do keep in mind that with this full moon, Venus will be square Neptune. So, Taurus is such a material sign and there's good things about that. And then, of course, there's the flip side of that. And I think that there's an element to this full moon where we need to make sure that our needs are in alignment with higher needs. How do we not get sucked into, it's just about money or it's just about what I own. It's, something richer. And I think that there's an element when Neptune's involved, we just need to kind of look at what are the illusions that we have about wealth and power, and what are the stories that we tell ourselves, and how do we kind of pull back the curtain and see what's reality. So if you're listening in different parts of the world, this is where your time for the Taurus full moon is. It's 8:35 a.m. New York, but it is in different times throughout the world. So I'm just going to let you all read for yourselves. So the Taurus full moon, it's the midpoint of the Scorpio lunar month. So something that began on October 28th, now, or October 27th, with the Scorpio new moon, we have, it kind of comes to its fruition with the Taurus full moon. That's the natural interplay. Full moons are also decision points. We kind of see things for what they are under the light of the full moon. So that might be a time when we have to make a choice or take action. So Sagittarius new moon, 2 weeks later, new moon, November 26th, 2019, 10:05 a.m. Eastern. This one's at 4 degrees of Sagittarius. So a new moon opens a new chapter. It opens a new container, creates a new container of energy. And it says that over the coming 4 weeks, we are living life through this new moon's themes. So at this point, we're out of Scorpio season, and we are looking at these themes of faith, truth, belief, and meaning. Sagittarius, and you know this if you are a Sagittarius or if you have a lot of Sagittarius energy, it's a sign that's on a quest. It's searching for wisdom, it's searching for knowledge, maybe it's traveling the world in search of it, or maybe it's, higher education, PhD, or just somebody that's constantly consuming information. So we're entering a season where we need to kind of think about, how do I see the world? What do I believe in? What's really educating me about the world? And is that, because I'm going out there in the world, or because somebody's telling me that the world is a certain way? But naturally, it might be a time when we are kind of pointing our attention towards foreign travel or long distance journeys. Again, Jupiter is wrapping up its time in Sagittarius around the time of a week after or so after this new moon. So, we're really feeling that kind of potent question of like, what do you believe in? Do you believe in something greater? Do you believe in yourself? These are questions that we will be thinking about as we go into the end of November. So I've kind of said this point already. I'll just quickly reiterate. It's like we need the intensity of Scorpio. It makes, even though it's making us face death, I know that's kind of a heavy word, but that's, Scorpio's sign that, and that brings us in touch with that energy archetypically. I think that when we have those experiences, we need to figure out, what we believe in. And that's, Sagittarius gets its wisdom after the trials and tribulations of Scorpio season. So here are your times for your Sagittarius new moon on November 26th, which is at 10:05 a.m. New York. And, I have times for Los Angeles, London, Sydney, and Auckland. So this is, we're going to transition into each sign. So, as I was saying earlier, you might not be an Aries, but maybe an Aries. So maybe this is giving you a perspective on somebody that you love or somebody that's close to your life. So Aries, I'm going to do this for each sign, and I think that it's really good to, let's say, ground ourselves in what the bigger picture is. So when we're looking at Aries's clock, we find Saturn in the 10th house. So this has been a year, if not 2 years, of really focusing on your professional life, your responsibilities, and really defining who or what you want to be when you grow up. It doesn't matter if you're 50 or 25. So that's something that's kind of the container for our experiences this month, Aries. But the real focus for this month, of course, being Scorpio season, is this is your time, Aries, for you to go into the deepest parts of yourself. This is a time to feel uncomfortable, and I mean that in the best possible way. It's a time of searching yourself, searching your soul, and looking to see what's hidden. It's a month to do your inner work, especially. So come November 19th, Mars is going to go into Scorpio. So you've been doing a lot of relationship work, Aries, while Mars has been in Libra, and Mars is your planet. And then come the 19th, the rest of the month, and even going into December, it's your time to do that really deep shadow work. So I'm kind of putting this on your radar, Aries. If you're the kind of person that you need, there's some stuff that you really should be working on. Maybe November is the month that you're working with somebody. I always think that when we have what's called a major 8th house transit, even if it just lasts 6 weeks, we need a guide. We need somebody to kind of help us navigate our underworld. So this just might be a month where you're feeling kind of vulnerable. You're kind of feeling uncomfortable. You have to open up. And this is building on some of the work that you've been doing with relationships. So do keep in mind Mercury is retrograde. It's retrograde in what's called your 8th house. So a lot of this deep inner work might involve having to go back and look at something. Mercury in Scorpio retrograde, as I was saying earlier, might have you re-seeing something, or something, maybe that was hidden is coming to light. The 8th house is about secrets. So maybe a secret is coming out, or maybe something that has been kind of buried is coming out. I would say the best way to work with this energy, I'm not saying it's bad, it's just I think really having honest conversations with people, it should be one of your priorities in November. That's just my 2 cents as an astrologer. And then, with Neptune turning direct, Neptune's such a quiet influence in astrology, because what Neptune does is dissolves the boundary between our physical world and the non-physical, the spiritual world. So for you, it's happening in what's called your 12th house. I just say pay attention to your dreams this month. Maybe you're feeling extra intuitive. Maybe, especially with all that Scorpio energy coming in, pay attention to your dreams. There might be, I think I said this already, a lot of soul searching for you this month, Aries. And as you do some soul searching, you might be reaching out to different modalities, different ways of thinking, different perspectives, for you to help articulate and explain what you're feeling. Aries, this is your important dates. I'm not gonna read them one by one just because it can get much. So this is what I did a little bit differently than the last webinar. I kind of put it in English, what these days would encapsulate, and then I put the astrology next to it. But this is just something for you to go back to. And of course, you have the slides or you have the video. You can go back and kind of make note of these dates on your calendar. And of course, if you are listening and you have any questions about this, if it's not clear, do let me know and we will get that cleared up. So Taurus. So it's, Taurus, and maybe this is something that's even beyond the Saturn, this time that you're in, this time of really defining what you believe in. And I think that there's an element, Taurus, Taurus, I love you, but you can get really set in your ways. And I think that this time, 2018, 2019, has been about kind of eroding or cracking that very particular or stubborn way of seeing yourself and seeing the world. So that's when you've been doing a lot of work in opening up how you see yourself, how you see the world, especially if it's kind of being informed from past experiences. On top of that, and this is not mentioned in the slide, Uranus is still in Taurus. It'll be in Taurus for another 7 years. You've got to reinvent yourself, Taurus. And I think that some of the astrology this month is kind of your reminder that you're changing, you're reinventing yourself. So really being open to that process, especially as we are in Scorpio season. And Scorpio season is all about surrendering to the forces that we can't control. We cannot control life and death. It just is a natural process. So for you, Taurus, Scorpio season is relationship season. It's a time when you're naturally reaching out to other people. Maybe you're getting into a relationship. Maybe you are, if you're in a relationship already, you kind of is a time to really focus on your partner and what your partner needs. So there's a bit of a power dynamic, a little bit of a back and forth with this full moon. With Scorpio season. And I got ahead of myself, but the full moon that's on November 12th is in Taurus. So this puts you into the spotlight, Taurus. If you might feel like kind of the more eyes are on you this month, there might be something that is kind of putting you out there into the world. So this full moon is really activating your sign of Taurus. I was going to say the full moon is at 19 degrees. If you were born, I'd have to do like around May 13th, if I'm doing my math correctly. This is what's on your sun. So you might, maybe plus or minus a few days, you might feel this more strongly. So Venus is what's called your ruling planet, and it's going to be spending part of the month in what's called your 8th house. So this is a time, from the 1st of November up until I believe it's the 25th, where you're doing your deep work. It's kind of like your own particular Scorpio season. So themes of power, themes of control, themes of the shadow. So you're really digging deep into yourself, Taurus, especially after, I think, October being so much about relationships and connection and new connections and negotiating with people. But by, I think it's the 25th, I think it's the 25th, Venus goes into what's called your 9th house. So, the sense of like, after you've done all of that really deep shadow work over the first few weeks of November, the last, let's say, week, less than a week of November, it's a sense of like, well, what do you believe in? What's your faith? What's your philosophy? So you are kind of coming back into the light after going through your personal underworld, this kind of natural progression throughout your personal calendar. It might be a time when towards the end of November, you're doing a lot of long distance travel, maybe even foreign travel, because that's the part of the chart that talks about long distance journeys. So I know you've been doing a lot of work on relationships while Venus was in Scorpio, but once Mars gets into Scorpio on November 19th, Taurus, that part of your life is going to heat up. And Mars typically in this part of the chart means if there's been a relationship issue that's been simmering in the background, Mars kind of heats it up. It's also a time when you become very aware of other people's needs. Mars is quite strong in Scorpio, so you might be having to negotiate and navigate some power dynamics into the second half of November. That said, you're feeling extra motivated and inspired, positive Mars, to make new connections and to reach out to people. Mercury is going to be retrograde in your relationship sign for the first few weeks of November. So Mercury retrograde is very, a classic Mercury retrograde is the ex that just finds you on Facebook or sends you an email or sends you a text. And you're like, wow, you're the last person I want to hear. Or I don't know, maybe you do want to hear from this person, but there is a sense of maybe past relationship or past relationship themes coming up for you in November. Also, I will add that the retrograde gives us a chance to kind of close something out, to tie up loose ends. So, maybe it's annoying that somebody comes back, or maybe it's not, but it gives us that opportunity to really bring closure. So with, Neptune turning direct in Pisces, which is your sign of friends and community, you might need to tend to a friend or a friendship or something in your group, because Neptune talks about, maybe there's a better word for this, but sacrifice, this idea that there are things that we have to do for others, and hopefully doing it for the good, and for a sense of altruism. These are your important dates, Taurus. I will leave you to peruse them. Again, if you have any questions, let me know. I will throw in there, and maybe I should have mentioned this in the overview, that there are a couple of aspects in November that are just more challenging. And on November 24th, Mars will oppose Uranus. So that day, or the kind of the days around that day, just might be a little bit more confrontational. Mars opposite Uranus can sometimes be very impetuous and fast. It's a need to break out of something that is confining us. So it's a need for freedom. So for you, Taurus, just kind of keep an eye on your relationships, because you might feel very confined and want to break out of something. Gemini. So Gemini, I think you, and I know I've said this a bunch of times on different various calls and whatnot, but I think Gemini and Capricorn have been having a bit of a rough go of it this year. And that's because, in your case, Gemini, you have Saturn in what's called your 8th house. So this has been a year where you've been having to do a lot of really intense and deep work. I think the best antidote to this time, or at least one of them, is working with a therapist. So I've known some Geminis who've actually taken that advice and started to work with somebody, because you need somebody to kind of help get you, through that emotional underworld. It's also a time when you're having to look at finances, particularly debt, taxes. So that's just something that's running in the background. I just wanted to make sure that we placed ourselves in the bigger picture for each sign. So Mercury is your ruling planet, Gemini. So Mercury retrograde is a natural time for you to pull back and reflect and integrate. And because normally Gemini, you just be running fast ahead. So I think the Mercury retrograde just gives you a natural time to pull back and to integrate your experiences and your choices. So for you, Mercury is turning retrograde in what's called your sign of health and wellness. It's a time to revisit old projects, to go back and see what needs a second look, especially that part of the chart for you is so much about the important but minutia of daily living, like having a schedule, brushing our teeth, going to work. So you're just really having to double check the details. Mercury retrograde in your sign of health, I think, also gives you a push to look again, or to take some new steps, to revisit how you take care of your body. This could be diet, this could be fitness. Nevertheless, Scorpio is, Mercury and Scorpio is giving you that sharper look. So maybe go to the doctors, get a physical, get some tests, that might be a good way to work positively with Mercury retrograde. For you, the full moon is happening in what's called your 12th house. So this is a natural time in your personal calendar, Gemini, when you need to kind of let go. And so with Mercury, let's say, turning retrograde and doing its retrograde thing in your sign of physical health, the full moon in your sign of spiritual health is a reminder that there's some things that need to be let go of, like habits, addictions. I think this full moon, if there's anything that you've been clinging onto, especially an addiction that affects your health, use this full moon to release it. So again, health is kind of a big thing for you this month, Gemini. And when Mars goes into Scorpio on November 19th, it's really, there's an immediacy to Mars. Mars is just you have to take action in this part of your life. So I'm not saying this to make you nervous, Gemini. I think that this is a time for due diligence. So what do you need to do to create optimum health in your life? Is it cleaning out your cabinets? Is it the fridge? Is it looking at your diet, working with a nutritionist, booking an acupuncture appointment, getting a shamanic healing with Scorpio, by the way, getting a psychic read, Scorpio. So just putting that out there for you, Gemini. And then, when Mercury turns direct on November 20th, you might find that things are finally moving direct, especially in the work and projects side of things. So for Gemini, relationships take the center stage. The new moon on November 26th is the natural time in your personal calendar when it's a time for renewal in relationships. So if you are single and you're looking to work with this energy, then this is your natural time to kind of put yourself out there, to reach out to people, to make new connections. If you are already in relationship, how do you kind of tend to your current relationship? The relationship sign, for you, Gemini, it's Sagittarius. It's all relationships. It's not just romantic relationships. So you just might find that the second half, or rather the last week of November, is very busy, especially going into December, with like a lot of people coming in and out of your life. You've had Neptune in your career sign for quite a while, Gemini, since 2012. So I think when Neptune turns direct on, I think it's the 25th of November, I think there's just like a bigger story in your life of making sure that your ambitions line up with either your higher potential or this idea that there's a master plan for you, and how do you align your goals, your ambitions, your direction in life with this idea of the master plan. So Gemini, here are your important dates. You can go through that as you need. It's, I think Gemini, mostly the stuff I think is happening this month with what are called the fixed signs and the cardinal signs. So I think with Gemini and of course Virgo and Pisces and Sagittarius, maybe not as many, it's not as like a bigger month, except for like the last part of November. So Cancer rising, if you're Cancer rising. And I've consistently over, I think the last month, almost all my clients have been either Cancers or Capricorns, or Cancer rising or Capricorn rising. And I know because it's a big year for you, Cancer, a lot of maybe personal milestones, a lot of transition and changes, new beginnings, new structures. And so relationships have been one of the big areas for you, Cancer. So that's, continuing to happen this month. But the real focus for you, Cancer, is, Scorpio season is a reminder to have fun. And it's nice when you get that reminder from the cosmos to tend to your passions, to find time for creativity, to find time for leisure, and to have fun and to play. The fifth house kind of puts us in touch, ideally, with the energy of children. So maybe you're being around children more, or maybe you're getting in touch with your inner child. And I think that after the year that maybe you've had, Cancer, you could use a little rest and relaxation and play. But then there's like a full moon in your what's called your 11th house on the 12th of November. And full moons kind of create a sense of immediacy. There's a need to make some decisions. And I think this full moon is really saying, like, who are your friends? Who are your community? And if you've been through a lot this year, I don't know, Cancer, maybe you haven't. I've certainly heard some stories from my clients. It's a good time to get back in touch with your allies, whether it's the people that are in your social circle, your community. But it's also a full moon when you're thinking about the future. that part of your chart gives us a bigger perspective. It talks about goals, it talks about your hopes and dreams for the future. So when Mars arrives in what's called your fifth house on November 19th, this is a time when typically we get that boost of confidence. Mars is it will be very strong in Scorpio. That's what's called your fifth house, Cancer. And when Mars is in this part of your chart, you kind of feel that swagger, you kind of feel that bravado, you want to take risks, you're kind of expressing who you are and you don't care what anybody thinks. So, Cancer, just make sure you're not being a little bit too pushy, like in a bad way, of course. But I think that, maybe you kind of need this renewal after some of the things that have been happening this year. So there's a new moon in Sagittarius on November 26th. And for you, Cancer, that's about health. That's about projects. That's about work. And so I think that after the swagger and the fun and the play of this month, you kind of get into the end of November and it's reality time. It's back to work. So when you get towards the end of November, Cancer, you might need to get very, in, the details of things. So you might be starting new projects, returning to your health, or, maybe some initiatives of how you take care of yourself in the latter part of November. And if you need like a time to really focus to, let's say, set new intentions of how you take care of yourself, it doesn't matter, maybe you want to do it before the new year. The new moon on the 26th is a time to really commit to yourself and commit to, let's say, bringing positive health into your life. So Cancer, here are your important dates. I'll leave it to you to read it. And if you have any questions, please let me know in the chat or send me an email if you're watching the replay. Moving along to Leo. So Leo, bigger picture, Saturn is in your sixth house. So you might kind of hear some similar themes to the signs that are side by side. And, for you, Leo, you're in a 2-year process. You got another year of really focusing on your health, really focusing on how you take care of your body, how you get your day-to-day life organized. It's a year to really ground in your life and ground in who you are. So make sure you're still doing those things even as we go into Scorpio season and Sagittarius season this month. So for you, Leo, the sun in Scorpio is what's called the foundation of your chart. So this is a natural time when you're pulling inward, you're focusing on family, or let's say your inner circle if you don't have a family like an immediate family. Leo, having Scorpio as the root or the foundation of your chart, it can, maybe this time of year brings up some uncomfortable or prickly things from the past, because Scorpio is not typically a warm and fuzzy sign. So you're retreating inward, to find the safety of the people that you can really trust. So maybe some old family stuff's coming up, some stuff from the past, memories. So, especially once Mars gets into Scorpio and to get into what's called the base, the foundation of your chart, starting November 19th, you're entering in let's say the second half of November and even into December, when there's a lot of stuff going on in the home. I've just noticed when Mars goes through what's called the fourth house, it's not a relaxing time in the home. Suddenly we have a ton of guests, families are coming by. Sometimes there's a move, or we're making changes in the home. So it might be kind of a noisy and busy place in your life, in your home, in the second half of November. So, with that in mind, and Mercury turning direct in Scorpio on November 20th, if you've been thinking about making some big decisions in your living situation, and certainly Mars in the mix can kind of, you kind of feel really like somebody lit a fire under you. It's better if you can to wait till after the 20th to really cement into those decisions, because Mercury is kind of in flux and you don't quite have the full story, the full picture until Mercury turns direct. So the full moon on November 12th puts your career in the spotlight. Taurus is your career sign. And this is, a point I want to make for you. It's kind of similar to the point I was making to Taurus. Leo, your career, starting this past March, has been in a time of reinvention. It will continue to be in a time of reinvention for the next 7 years. And this full moon and even the Scorpio new moon on the 27th of October is a check-in with this process. So you might it'll be interesting to see what happens for you, because this full moon can naturally be a time when you make a decision about your direction. You make a decision about the duties or responsibilities that you want to carry in the world. There might be a change in your career or a change in your work environment. It's naturally a time when if you want to make a job change, that you can with that full moon. So whatever changes you are making, if you are, let's say maybe you're looking for work or you're looking to make a job change, just keep in mind this idea that you're in a bigger period of time when this part of your life has to perhaps even radically change. So just file that away. So when we have the new moon on November 26th, it's opening a new time where it's a reminder for you to really revel in who you are. Leo, you're the sign of creativity. You're the sign of identity, self-expression, talents. And that's your role as, of one of the 12 zodiac signs. You're here to remind all of us, even Scorpios, to shine. And when the sun moves into Sagittarius, it's a natural time for you to shine. It's a natural time for you to express who you are, to express your talents. So this is like a new season for you to kind of recommit to that. It's also a time to have more confidence, to play, and to enjoy, let's say, the passions of life. It's also a time for romance as well. So Leo, these are your important dates. Let me know if you have any questions. Virgo. So Virgo, this continues to be a year where you're working on, as I was saying a few moments ago with Leo, you're having to take yourself and take your talents seriously. So, Virgo, love you, but I know that sometimes you can put a lot of people ahead of you. And I think with Saturn going through this part of your chart, just remind yourself that this is a year where don't sell yourself short. Don't put yourself, or let's say expend yourself for somebody else. So continue to value yourself and value your talents and value what you have to give to the world. So this is a busy time for you. I think when the sun goes through the third house, we're rushing around. There's appointments, there's things to do. There's information that's kind of coming at us quickly. So it's probably going to be a busy month for you. And with Mercury retrograde for kind of the first few weeks of November. Make sure you're getting the right information. So if this is a busy time, you might, just kind of fair warning, have to revisit things, might have to do things twice, or, going back and getting more information. I think that Mercury retrograde in this part of your chart, Virgo, is just a reminder to, I don't want to say slow down. Maybe it's just to be very conscientious of the choices that you're making and how you're communicating. So with the Taurus full moon on November 12th, it's putting travel and education in the spotlight. So this is a natural time in your personal calendar when you may be thinking about booking a long distance trip, even a trip overseas or a foreign trip. This is also a time when this idea of higher education is in the spotlight. So you might be taking some classes, especially with the sun in Scorpio as well, taking classes that will really help you, like more on a specific level, get to where you need to go on a career level. So as the new moon happens in what's called your fourth house, and this new moon is on November 26th, you're entering into the rest of November and even into the beginning of December, where it's about home and family and pulling inward. The fourth house is the root, it's the base, it's the foundation. So it's a time when you really need to nourish your roots and nourish your foundation. So this includes nesting, this includes spending more time in the home or spending time with family. And then because it's a new moon, you might be entering a time when, if you are thinking about moving or want to move, that this is giving you that natural window to move. Jupiter is coming up to the end of its time in what's called your fourth house. Maybe Virgo, you have already moved or made a big move this past year, this past 12 months. And so sometimes when Jupiter gets to the end of a sign, we kind of get the gifts of Jupiter. So, sometimes Jupiter in this part of your chart does talk about new additions to the family. Could be a baby, could be children, could be somebody coming to live with you. Just kind of tossing that in there. So Virgo, these are your important dates. Let me know if you have any questions. Libra. So for you, Libra, this has been a time when it's really been about laying new foundation or really like shoring up the foundation of your life. Saturn's been in what's called your fourth house since the beginning of 2018. So you're continuing, of course, to do that. But this is, Scorpio season for you is about money. But do keep in mind, because Venus is your ruler, Libra, there is a lot of movement for the most of November. So from November 1st until November, I think it's the 25th, it's busy, you're moving around a lot. There's this kind of focus on information, communication, ideas, choices, and new experiences. So it's probably not going to be a quiet November for you, Libra, probably not till you get towards the end of November. You do keep in mind, Mars has been in Libra since earlier in October and will be in Libra until November 19th. So for you, when Mars is in your sign, Libra, you kind of a little bit more hot and bothered. You have kind of this energy of Mars. You're going out there in the world. You have an opinion to make. Maybe your interactions with people have been a little bit more pointed, but Mars gives you kind of the guts and the courage to do what you need to do right now. It can be a little argumentative, but I just wanted to kind of point that out. It's a time of taking the lead and getting ahead. So, with the sun and Scorpio for you, Libra, this is a natural time in your personal calendar when it's about your material needs. So, this includes money, this includes how you make your money, and even the things that you own and purchase. So, I think the bigger question for Scorpio season for you is, what do I need? What do I need on a material level? So, you're going to be very resource conscious this month. This could include, having or getting more money, but also, of course, like this idea of resource. You're kind of stocking up on things. You're kind of paying attention to, what you own. And this idea, especially once Mars gets to Scorpio on November 19th, it's about material stability. You're going to be a lot more motivated once Mars changes signs. You might find that the second half of November and into December, it's about really creating a strong material life for yourself. This idea that you're going to be thinking a lot more of value in November. Is this worth it? What is this cost? Or what is the invisible cost as well? So because Mercury is in retrograde and one of your money signs, just due diligence as an astrologer, if you're making a big purchase, I would wait till after November 20th if you can. Just an idea. So the spotlight is on your 8th house this month, and Taurus for you really gets to the heart of things, this idea of possession, security, and trust. So you're looking at these deeper emotions with this full moon. And that's the thing about the full moon, is it puts in light the things that normally are hidden. That's what the 8th house is. It's normally something that we kind of feel protective and we hide away. So it's a full moon when you're having to maybe kind of react and to like deal with something that makes you feel vulnerable. But I think with this full moon, especially with Venus in what's called your 3rd house at the time, just make sure you're talking about what you need. Talking about something that maybe you haven't had the courage to talk about. And if you have a partner, have a good line of communication with your partner. Neptune is turning direct in what's called your health and wellness sign of Pisces. And I just noticed over time working with clients with Neptune in this part of your chart, it's made you very sensitive. So just keep in mind if anything around food allergies come up this month, especially around the latter part of November. Neptune is kind of dissolving the boundaries that's maybe protecting you from allergens, or this idea that you're more, your physical body is more sensitive to the energies around you. So maybe, I don't know, getting some energy work this month. Here are your important dates, Libra. So let me know if you have any questions. Now we move to Scorpio. So there's this bigger thing that's been happening for Scorpio. I can say this from personal experience because I am a Scorpio. Saturn has been in Scorpio's sign of communication, communication and learning since the beginning of 2018. So maybe you're having to do a lot of focus on education and learning things and taking classes, but this bigger idea of how you communicate and how you're heard, that's continuing to be a major focus this year and into next year. Just putting that, that's obviously a bigger thing that's happening, but it's, it is your birthday season. Happy birthday, Scorpio. My birthday is November 17th, so I got some time until I get to celebrate mine. So Mars is in the 12th house for you for most of this month, unless you're born after November 19th. Typically, this is a time when Scorpio, if Mars is in Libra, where we don't have a lot of energy. It's hard to start something because you're naturally in a time of rest and pulling back from the world and shedding the past. Maybe you felt some very strong emotions at this time. Maybe you've redevoted yourself to some sort of spiritual practice. Libra for you does talk about, that part of the chart, at least, the need to really tend to your spiritual health. So even though Mars is classically debilitated in this part of your chart, I think that you can use it to put Mars's energy towards, instead of starting something in the physical world, like really putting that energy towards your spiritual and emotional health. So this might be a time of self-reflection and soul searching for you, Scorpio. But again, it's our birthday, so it's a time of new beginnings and new chapters, and this idea that we are starting a new personal year. The sun is in our first house. So I think that once Mars goes back into Scorpio, if you've been feeling a little like lower in energy, once Mars goes into Scorpio on November 19th, that's like, look out, Scorpio's got its full strength back. So, that's when we really get a chance to move forward, to take action, to really feel that we kind of have our mojo back. And just looking at the comments, yeah, hallelujah. So do keep in mind that with the Taurus full moon on November 19th, no, November 12th, relationships are in the spotlight. So it's not just romantic relationships, it's all relationships. And so you might be more aware of other people and the needs of other people, and needing to make a decision or take action in how you interact with somebody. That said, if you are single and looking to kind of make new connection, this full moon might give you an opportunity. It's probably in general going to be a very social time for you, Scorpio, around the full moon on the 12th. I personally, details haven't been completely finalized. I got invited to do a talk in Manhattan on the astrology of 2020, and it'll be on the full moon. So I will be surrounded by people. I mean, that's one of the ways in which this full moon can manifest. And because this full moon is kind of talking about Uranus and Taurus and this idea that we're reinventing relationships for the next 7 years, I do be open to the unexpected, because Uranus and Taurus is a little bit of a wild card for us right now. So money and material needs, Sagittarius is Scorpio's money sign. So I think when the sun finally goes into Sagittarius on the 23rd of November, and then you have the Sagittarius new moon on the 26th of November, it's a time to kind of refocus on our material needs and our material stability. Scorpio, these are your important dates. I see that there's a question from Jenny. Jenny, if you can clarify your question with being the birth month, do you think the Scorpio themes around that time? Are you asking, Jenny, if what's going on affects the rest of our personal year, like a solar return? I just want to make sure I'm understanding your question correctly, because I know that some of these things that we are talking about, at least from a Scorpio perspective, it does like seed or like weaves itself into the energies of the coming year, especially if you've got a birthday on the full moon. So if you're born on November 12th or close to November 12th, it's going to be a very highlighted personal year. going forward. Janet, I put the relationship confusion because Venus square Neptune can sometimes like cloud our judgment in relationships. It can put a glamour on things. So that's why I was like, confusion, are we seeing things clearly? Sagittarius. Wait, before we go to Sagittarius, I want to make sure I see Jenny's question. Jenny, I was thinking about Saturn's placement be highlighted the sun. I'm not sure, Jenny. I mean, Saturn is in Scorpio's third house. So this idea, like I think once the sun gets into Capricorn, that's when we're revisiting this, this bigger lesson around voice and communication. So Sagittarius. So you are, this idea like on a bigger perspective that 2018, 2019, and part of 2020 is about money, and money in both in a tangible sense, but also in a, let's say, intangible sense. Like, what do I need? What resources do I need in order to feel safe and secure? So, that's something that's happening in the background. I think especially as you start to go into the new year, this idea of money and security and finances are going to continue to be very highlighted. When the sun gets to Scorpio, Scorpio is what's called your last sign, Sagittarius. So this is a time when you are wrapping up a personal year. You've sailed through all 12 signs, you've reached the last one, and it's the end of a journey. So the first few weeks of November are a natural time for you to pull back from the world. After this big journey of life, what have you learned? I mean, Sagittarius, you're a very philosophical sign. So certainly there's a sense of like needing to evaluate and reflect and retreat on what the last 12 months have been for you. So it's a natural time to let go and to shed the past. That said, I mean, it is naturally a spiritual time for you the first few weeks of November. The full moon on November 12th really puts your physical life and your health, your diet, how you take care of your body in the spotlight. So you need to make a decision about something in that department. It could mean making a decision about a project. It could mean like needing to recommit or kind of assess, going to the gym or, eating in a way that is the most optimal for your body. So maybe make some appointments around this time. It is very much about, health and vitality with this full moon. Venus will be in Sagittarius for the bulk of November. When Venus is in your sign, you feel a little charming, a little flirtatious, a little confidence. Like Venus, you feel like you're more social with Venus in your sign. So there's kind of this interesting contradiction going on one hand, you're pulling back from the world, but Venus is kind of getting you out there at the same time. So Mars is going through your sign of friendships and social connection. And so right now, Mars it's that part of your life. Friends and community are a big focus and a big priority for the first few weeks of November. But come November 19th, Mars is going to go into Scorpio. And Scorpio, as I was saying a few moments ago, is your sign that kind of pulls you back from the world. It's the sign where you kind of shed the past and, divest yourself of the things that you don't need. It's almost like there's asceticism to that part of your chart. And then you prepare for the next journey because in the new year, Mars is going to go into Sagittarius. So it is a time when you might feel a little bit more lower energy. Make sure you're getting your vitamin C, in taking care of your physical health while Mars is in this part of the chart. So come the 26th of November, it's a new moon. It's a Sagittarius new moon for you. And this means that going into the rest of November and into December, it's a time of renewal and new beginnings. So, by then, the sun's in Sagittarius, you're starting to celebrate your birthday season. And if your birthday is on the 26th or very close to the 26th of November, it's going to be a year of new beginnings for you. So, and I will add, and these are, of course, are your important dates, Sagittarius, Jupiter being your ruling planet, it's coming to the end of Sagittarius in November. So you've had 12 months of having Jupiter in its own sign. And I think it's been a little bit of a mixed bag, if I had to be honest, because Jupiter has been in this dance with Neptune. So I think, Sagittarius is a sign that's so much about faith and like confidence and really believing that it's all going to work out, despite all odds. But then Neptune has really at times eroded at that. So that said, with Jupiter coming to the end of Sagittarius in November, these kind of bigger themes that you've been working on are kind of coming to the surface. And then my hope is that, Jupiter at the end of Sagittarius kind of gives you that confidence and boost that you would normally have had with Jupiter and Sagittarius. The last time Jupiter was in Sagittarius was 2006, 2007. It's a 12-year cycle. So, this has been a time for new beginnings for you, Sagittarius. And, 12 years ago, you didn't have all that Neptune energy to contend with. So you're starting a new journey in life where you're having to really do some soul searching and make the next 12 years really count in some way. Capricorn, so we're starting to get to the end. I was kind of saying this when I was talking about Gemini. I think that it's been a little bit of a tough 2019 for Capricorn. And, it's with Saturn in your first house. You kind of had to work a little bit harder. It's been exhausting. You're laying a new foundation in your life, but at the same time, and, I didn't mention it in the slide, you've got not Neptune, you've got Pluto. It's almost like you're trying to build a foundation at the same time, like the old one is being like demoed around you. So it's been a little bit of a hard time, but it's also been a time of personal milestones. So if you were to like zoom out on 2019 Capricorn, you probably have seen a year that's been somehow one of those bigger years, one of those milestone years. So, Scorpio season for you, the sun is going through what's called your 11th house. So it's naturally a time for you to reach out to friends, to spend time in your community. This is a time for you to find your allies, to find the people that really understand you. So you're reaching out to those people, those groups, and also your social network. With Mars traveling through Libra for the first few weeks of November, that is your career sign. You are Capricorn in what's called a 2-year career peak. When Mars is going through this part of your chart, and you've already been experiencing this, you're extra motivated to get out there into the world, to really push your ambitions, to be more assertive in your professional life or even in your worldly life. So that's wrapping up for you in November, but that continues to be a focus. So this idea of responsibilities, your worldly ambitions. But come November 19th, Mars goes into Scorpio. And yes, you've already been kind of reaching out to your social network and making friends. But, this idea that Mars is going to really motivate you to make those social connections. So it might be about networking. It might mean about spending more time in your community. I mean, that part of your chart can also be a little political. So this idea of society, humanity, these broader issues that we all have to navigate. But it is a time when you are thinking about the future and how do you make those plans for the next, let's say, the next 2 years. So the Taurus full moon on November 12th puts creativity and talents in the spotlight, and you have to, it's a time for you to really kind of revel in who you are. Use the full moon to show off. If there's something that, especially with Mars up at the highest point in your chart, you're trying to get ahead this month, at least for the first few weeks of November. And with the full moon in what's called your fifth house, it's a time to really show off. So keep that in mind. It's also a time when children or even play, fun, and passion take center stage. So Venus is going to be in your first house come, I believe it's November 25th. So that's later this month, but Venus will be in Capricorn the end of November and into December. It's usually a time when you feel a little social, a little flirty, a little charming. With Venus being a planet of money and value, you might be very aware of the value of things in the latter part of November. So Capricorn, here are your important dates. Let me know if you have any questions. Aquarius, so we're definitely starting to get to the end. So 2018, 2019 for you have been about, in some way, retreating behind the scenes. You've been in this, Aquarius, your clock, by the way, runs on a 29-year cycle because you're ruled by Saturn. And so Saturn, the past couple of years, has been in what's called your 12th house. And if you've been listening to some of the other signs when they've kind of had these 12th house journeys, for them it's a month, but because you're ruled by Saturn, it's 3 years. So do keep in mind that this continues to be a point in your life where you are kind of divesting yourself of the past. You're wrapping up this nearly 30-year cycle in your life, and you're preparing for the next trip around the zodiac that begins starting in March of 2020. So November, Scorpio season is career season. So this is a time when the sun is going through the highest reaches of your chart. So it's a time to get noticed. It's a time for you to be seen for, what you're trying to put out there in the world. So ambitions, career, public life are all a big focus in November of this year. So with Mercury retrograde in your career sign for most of November, do keep in mind if you are starting, if there's any new initiatives in your professional life, if you're trying to get a new job, it just might take a little bit longer. I just know that Mercury, can sometimes things take a little bit longer to pan out. So just keep that in mind if you're looking for work or if you're looking to make some big moves in your professional life. So the full moon on November 12th puts home and family in the spotlight. So it might be a natural time when you're spending more time in the home, or at least needing to take action in the home. And this even includes moving. So if you've been thinking about moving, this full moon kind of gives you the impetus to do something about that. I will say, Aquarius, that this part of your life with the Uranus energy since March and into the next 7 years, you may have already made a big move. I've known a lot of Aquariuses that have made some big cross-country moves because the very foundation of your chart needs to change. There needs to be some sort of like different, like a radically different way in which you nurture and tend to the roots of your life. So once Mars gets into Scorpio on November 19th, remember Scorpio is your career sign, you're coming into a 2-year like career peak, because it takes 2 years for Mars to go around the zodiac. When Mars gets into Scorpio, you're going to feel extra motivated to get get out there in the world and kind of push your ambitions. So it's probably, the second half of November, especially going into December, is going to be a busy time for you. This is like you're on fire, like professionally going into December. So just keep this in mind if you're looking to make career changes or get noticed for something that you're working on. Mars is going to be very strong in that part of your chart. Before that, though, Mars, since beginning of October, has been in what's called your 9th house. So the first few weeks of November, you might be continuing to take classes, especially classes that you need for work and career. So this could be professional development, even like really specialized training for your career. So there's definitely still that education focus for the first few weeks of November. The new moon on the 26th of November is in your sign of like friends and community. So it might be a time when you're really reaching out, going into the into December, you're reaching out to your social network. That part of your chart is about the future. It is about looking ahead. It is looking about, what are your goals? So it's a time to really get like a higher perspective, to zoom out on your life. So as you go into the end of November and even into December, you're maybe like looking at your life through a more like a wider philosophical lens. Like, where do you want to go? And especially if you've been in a time where it's been more about endings than beginnings, then this is, I think, a good new moon to get some perspective. Aquarius, these are your important dates. If you have any questions, just let me know. Pisces, yes, we've reached the end. And if you are a Pisces, thank you for holding out. If you are watching on the replay, maybe you fast forwarded. But Pisces, you're the last sign for a reason. It's because you are the sign that encapsulates, that kind of takes in all the experience of all the signs. And for that, you have a deep wisdom about life and about how the universe is. So for you, Pisces, this has been a year where it's been about friendships. And I think even 2018, when Saturn goes through what's called the 11th house, it tends to be a little brutal on the friendship department. So I say this in case you've seen some friendships leave your life over the last 2 years. Do keep in mind this is a time when you are making stronger connections. The people that are staying are the ones that are rock solid. Maybe the people that left, you didn't have that rock solid connection anymore. It's also a time for you to reach out, build community, build social connections. So that's like the bigger picture. Pisces, when with Mars in Libra, October and into the first few weeks of November, it's a bit of a heavier emotional soul-searching time. It's, you're really facing the deeper material of life, the deeper material within yourself, the things that are normally kept private. It's intimacy, it's vulnerability, but, you are doing your inner work this month, Pisces. Do keep in mind that Jupiter, it is your ruling planet, and it's been in your career sign since November of 2018. So You are wrapping up a year-long focus on career this this month. And do keep in mind that Jupiter, your ruling planet, spends about a year in each of the 12 zodiac signs. So you have these distinct year-long chapters, year-long focuses. And so, as Jupiter comes to the end of Sagittarius in November, you're gonna hopefully see what you've been working towards. Maybe it's the blossoming of all this hard work. And typically Jupiter, maybe it's been a little bit exhausting too, but this has been a time for you to like push open doors in the world, to have new opportunities. Kind of similarly, the sun is going through what's called your ninth house. And this is a time for you to get very philosophical about life, look towards deeper purpose, higher meaning. Maybe you're looking at different philosophical traditions, different wisdom traditions, maybe religion is factoring into your life in some way. Similarly, or not similarly, foreign travel might be, planning a trip in November, or just a long distance journey. It's, if you're here in the US, that can mean like going 1,000 miles or something like that. It's not like, you're going somewhere in the neighborhood. It's like a long distance journey. And then also, of course, education. This is a time for you to really educate yourself. So come November 12th, there's going to be a full moon in your sign of education, information, and communication. So when there is a full moon in this part of your chart, information might come to light. Full moons put things in light. You might need to take action because you have heard something or received some information, but you might even also need to make a choice. That part of the chart talks about choices. And with Venus in Sagittarius during this full moon, you might be making some career decisions, especially decisions about your direction in life. This also makes education a priority. So you might be taking classes or needing to kind of bone up on something in general. So I think I made this point already. This full moon will also kind of highlight a need to make a decision or a major choice. Keep in mind that after November 19th, Mars goes into the part of your chart that talks about faith and meaning. So you might be on a quest in the latter part of November. You might be traveling more, you might be searching, you might be seeking, and this is something that's going to take you into December. So the latter part of November, especially with the new moon in what's called your career sign of Sagittarius on November 26th, you're entering a 4-month period where your professional life is very highlighted. Now, remember, that's been an area of focus for the last year. So the new moon might bring a new chapter, a new leaf in that story. It might mean a job change or a new job opportunity. It'll be interesting to see what happens when I think Jupiter goes into Capricorn on December 2nd, because maybe all these new beginnings, all these possibilities kind of concretize and come together in the beginning of December. It might mean some sort of professional new beginning for you on December 2nd, if I'm remembering my astrology correctly. So Pisces, these are your important dates. Let me know if you have any questions. And, to that point, again, if you have any general questions, let me know. And I know you guys have sat through approximately an hour and a half. I think I did this in an hour and a half, and it's pretty good. I think the last time I was pushing 2 hours with all this information. I know that it's a lot to take in. I mean, hey, it's a lot of talking on my part. But yeah, thank you. I'm going to turn off the share just so I can see you all more clearly. And so again, thank you all for joining me for this sneak peek at November's astrology. If I had to sum it up in one word, I think it's a time when we're having to get out of our comfort zone. And Scorpio season is a time in general when we need to get out of our comfort zone. It's part of the natural, let's say, story as we move through each zodiac time or sign. But the reason we're getting out of our comfort zone in November is because we're starting the month or very close with the Scorpio new moon energies, and these Scorpio new moon energies were seated with the energies of Uranus and Taurus. So I think in November, it's going to be a little expect the unexpected in some way. I think it's a time when we need to look at where we're playing it safe and then have the courage, Scorpio, to maybe stop playing it safe, to kind of get out of our, our comfort zone. It's a time, especially with that Taurus full moon on November 12th, where we need to really look at what resources do we need at this time, whether it's the income that we make or the things that we accumulate. It is about our physical life. Janet's asking about astrology on the world stage. I'm going to plead the fifth on that, only because it could get into a really, I want to play a little neutral. But I will say that, and this is a politically neutral statement, that we're in a time in general where we need to all make some choices and to look how we see the world and look how we see ourselves in the world. And we're all doing our work. And I think that some of the things that are going on, we're being kind of confronted by some things, and it's making us look at ourselves differently. That was a very hopefully neutral statement, but I think on the political stage, I would want to see what's happening in January, because the end of December into January, because that's when we go into the next round of eclipses, and these are going to be some really interesting eclipses. But November, it's Scorpio season, Sagittarius season. It's all good. So yeah, that was a lot of talking on my part. If there's any other questions, somebody did ask me, and maybe I mentioned this on my Facebook Live, but this idea of, because we're going into a month that has all this Uranus energy, it's like, oh my God, what's going to happen? Should I just cover myself in black tourmaline? I mean, I don't know. I'm a little optimistic about Uranus. Maybe we do need to have things like shaken up a little bit, kind of keep us on our toes. So, again, what I was saying is that there's a part of our life, wherever Taurus is in our chart, that we can't play it safe anymore. We have to shake things up. We have to reinvent that part of our life. So there's an area of our life in November that's going to need some reinvention. And this is just part of a story that's been going on for the last 7 years. So with that in mind, thank you all for joining me tonight. Thank you for those that are watching on the replay as we look at the astrology of November 2019. And for those watching on the replay, if you have any questions, if something wasn't clear, please let me know. Send me an email. Follow me on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, Empowering Astrology. Also sign up for my newsletter. Let's keep in touch that way. Again, it's been a pleasure. It's nice to see some familiar faces. I know there's some new people on this webinar, but I also know that there's a lot of repeats that come for these webinars, and I deeply appreciate it. And thank you for investing in me and investing in my work. And I deeply, deeply appreciate it. So on that note, thank you all very much, and we will be in touch another time. So bye.